Profits versus jobs. That's a conflict Ralph Gomery sees as the root of America's offshoring problem.
They are pursuing maximizing profit. That's their goal. The country is losing the wage bill, and its goal is to have wages.
And then what they're doing is right for their shareholders and their constituents, but it's not right for the people of America who are unable to find work today.
The problem with our system is that everything is short-term. So when you talk to a CEO and you say to a CEO, an American CEO, do you realize that they're going to take your technology and they're going to be your competitor? The CEO says, yes, but I only have 3 or 4 years to get my stock up so I can get my bonus, and they kick the can down the road, and it's the next guy's problem.
This will end badly for all of us, but everybody is so short-term in thinking and in their tenure that they're willing to take chances that are right for today, that they probably know in their minds is long-term bad for America tomorrow.
Ironically, nobody understood this growing divergence between corporate interests and the common good better than candidate Bill Clinton during the 1992 elections.
You must do your part. You must be responsible. American companies must act like American companies again, exporting products, not jobs.
But such corporate irresponsibility wasn't always the American way.
Corporations used to think they had a stakeholder theory. In other words, they had a responsibility to the nation, to their communities, to their workers, and to their shareholders. Something morphed in our own system about 20, 25 years ago, where shareholder value became the end-all and be-all. And then the CEOs tied their own compensation to shareholder value. And then other countries figured out how to incentivize them to increase short-term shareholder value by transferring production, manufacturing, R&D there.
And we can never forget that when China manipulates currency, when China provides illegal subsidies of all sorts for manufacturing, for the act of exporting itself, these U.S.-owned companies benefit. They like the status quo. They want to protect it, and they have paid a lot of money for it.
Money and the power of America's multinational corporations in influencing China trade policy. That's something two men from two distinctly different worlds can agree on.
And I live in that world. I watch those dollars go.
Campaign laws allow them to spend unlimitless amounts of money.
It's a tsunami.
But to former White House advisor Jared Bernstein, it's more than just money and politics driving our jobs offshore. It's also the prevailing free market view in the Oval Office, regardless of political party.
I think there is a deeply embedded view that I do not think is wholly wrong, that capital must be happy if we're going to have a successful economy.
And no multinational company has been happier to move its capital offshore than General Electric. But this is truly a fool's game.
The Chinese have no intention of turning over their domestic market to foreign companies. Once they're able to master the technology, they are going to make it very difficult for foreign corporations to make a profit.
When I go out and do speeches to corporate audiences on China and they want me to talk about strategy, it's like, hey, you're going over to China, you're giving them your avionics so you can participate in a regional jet game in China, and 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, you're going to try to sell your regional jets in Europe, and your biggest competitor is going to be that China guy. How stupid is that?
What's happening, unfortunately, in the United States is way too many of our multinational corporations, not only they're shifting their manufacturing overseas, but along with it goes their technology, their intellectual property. And while many of us are concerned, deeply concerned about the loss of jobs, we're just as concerned about the loss of intellectual property. That's sort of the future of America.
The thing is, nobody's really looked at all the industries that have been lost. It's very hard to get information on the industries that are gone or that are just about gone because the government doesn't keep track of any data. They don't follow industries. They have no market analysts who follow specific industries. So nobody knows what's happened with all of our industrial capacity that's vanished or is in the process of vanishing.
The next thing you see is you're not doing any work over there yourself. The Chinese are doing it for you entirely. And we see that. The two mid-range aircraft in the world are the Airbus 319 and the Boeing 737. 5 years from now, the Chinese have already told both companies they will no longer buy either aircraft. That mid-range aircraft, the one that is dominant throughout Asia, will be entirely manufactured in China under a Chinese mark or name, using technology that they took from Airbus on the one hand and Boeing on the other.
Look around, well, tell me what you see. Every day, more people in the street. Too bad they sent our jobs away. In China, they're not workers, they're just slaves. When people wake, it's a world of trade and greed. And the CEOs get richer, and our jobs all move offshore. Oh.
The Soviet Union could make an unbelievable intercontinental ballistic missile, but they couldn't make a loaf of bread. Now, we can make a stealth fighter, but we can't make a pair of shoes.
You can't be a world power if you don't make anything but hot air, and we're well on our way to that.
You can't have sustainable long-run economic growth at robust levels in the absence of a manufacturing base.
Less than 9% of American workers now in the manufacturing sector. We as a country can't survive into the long term with under 25% of our women and men making things.
Manufacturing jobs have a higher multiplier than service industry jobs. That is to say, every one manufacturing job that you bring into a community ultimately supports half a dozen other jobs.
If you are honest about how jobs have evolved in the United States, small business arose only when there was a stable manufacturing base put under them. My mother, and many mothers of yours, I'm sure, up on the commission, they gave themselves home permanence. It was only when there was a stability of middle-class incomes that you had beauty parlors and nail salons and pizza parlors and McDonald's and all of the things we think of as small business.
Every one manufacturing job that you bring into a community ultimately supports half a dozen other jobs.
Those manufacturers provide the good-paying jobs in our community, and it's the jobs that a father or mother can work at the factory, raise their family, have some health care, have a safe pension, donate a little bit of money into the basket in church on Sunday, vote for the school levy, vote for the police and fire levy to help build strong communities. And when those factories got wiped out and they went from 200 to 30 people, it becomes very difficult for these communities to sustain themselves.
Ultimately, the most important reason why America must restore its manufacturing base is to hold on to the research and development, the R&D. That is the taproot of all of the technological innovations we will need to create new jobs in new industries.
Manufacturing is the origin of 70% of U.S. R&D. That's true even today.
You can't do your R&D here and do your manufacturing there.
You can't move your manufacturing overseas and not move your technology and all your engineering.
I mean, it's nice to do R&D and come up with a super-duper design or a new product, but if you can't make it, what's the sense of doing the R&D?
When we say we've kept our technology or our IP, but we've moved our manufacturing, that's just not true. It's an impossible feat.
They're totally coupled. So as manufacturing has moved offshore, R&D has gone right with it.
So as we move more and more manufacturing over to China and people can re-engineer and understand how things are made, we are teaching the country how to compete with us, and ultimately they are.
So that the new products, the next cutting-edge product, is being developed there where the manufacturing's going on in China, rather than here where the manufacturing was and now is no longer.
There's no other way around it. We can't make it on our own. All the jobs went to China. Now
Now I'm losing my own home.
We need to change course.
We need definitive U.S. action.
We need to show the Chinese that there are limits, that they have to be responsible citizens, and if that they're not responsible citizens, there are consequences.
I like the idea of doing business with China. There are a few people over there, but it must be on our terms. If it's not on our terms, then it's on their terms, and if it's on their terms, they don't have our best interests in mind.
People sometimes say that we can't stand up to the Chinese on any of these issues because we risk starting a, quote, trade war. My message to the American people is that we're already in a trade war.
What's wrong with taking China to task? They pirate our technology, they pirate our intellectual property rights, they counterfeit our goods and services, and no administration has the backbone to stand up to them.
It's been dismaying for me to see a succession of administrations, both Republican and Democratic, unable or unwilling to take on the China trade imbalance. And I would say part of that is the very cozy relationship that any White House has with the big multinational corporations and with the intellectual elite that have taken a very soft view on this issue. So I think both Democratic and Republican administrations have failed us in the same way.
So how do we, the people, overcome the power and influence of the big multinational companies and the deadly inertia of our political leadership to bring about long overdue changes in the U.S.-China trade relationship?
You know, it almost takes a movement, a Tea Party that's different than, it's completely divorced of left or right. Or it's virtually a Tea Party that differentiates between right and wrong, which is very much different than left or right.
I think this can only happen when the American people really understand what is happening to us and begin to demand that their congressmen and senators really, and the national government, take action in these areas.
I think that at every level, people could boycott to some extent, and there would be a shot heard around the world.
It's got to be a whole community effort by the citizenry, but we do need to create jobs. It doesn't always happen accidentally.